And we're live. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about, moral and ethical nihilism. We got a video that's meant to be a reply to my video on why ethics matters by Finchernauts. And we know the guy, but yeah, the video, we'll just watch it and we'll let you guys come to your own conclusions. But of course, we'll be providing our own commentary.
Whatever you could say about any philosophy or political stance, I mean, you have to stand back in awe at the sort of at the mental gymnastics and bullshit that you have to pull in order to convince yourself to be an ethical nihilist. They have one argument, and their entire argument is a straw man of their opponent's position. Now, I haven't watched this video yet, but just to show you that this is true, I guarantee you this video is 57 minutes long, and I guarantee you within the first 5 minutes, one of the two things will happen. One, he's going. Well, no, these two things will happen. He's going to try and argue that ethics are a normative position, and this is the crux to pretty much all nihilistic arguments, because if ethics are framed as a normative stance, then that means they can introduce a problem known as Hume's guillotine, which is when you are essentially bridging an unexplainable gap between something which is performative and something which is descriptive. So, for instance, trying to explain why someone ought to have a specific preference. And the problem with this is that ethical arguments are not normative, they are descriptive. They describe an ethical truth which can be observed. Natural law legal theories and ethical philosophies don't attempt to claim that everyone ascribes to these ethical stances as a moral framework. That's the reason that they're legal theories. It's implied in the fact that that there even is a sort of legalistic framework that these are argued through, that it is assumed that people can deviate away from these behaviors. I mean, the fact that ethical nihilism it even has the influence that it does, it's mainly because of a couple factors. One being state propaganda. It's obviously the dominant view in academia because, well, if if relativism is assumed to be the main position, well, I mean, then statism has a hell of a lot of an easier time justifying its own existence. Whereas with natural law arguments, well, then the state has to actually explain itself, and God forbid we can't do that. But also, I think it's just a lot of people don't understand ethical argumentation either. And that's pretty clear based on the fact that, this is a complete mischaracterization of what an ethical truth statement is.
Any argumentation that is necessarily going to reject any objective standard of right and wrong, which is basically what ethics is trying to do, is necessarily going to devolve into a creation of might makes right. You basically just get a situation where all the government needs to do to justify itself is to just say, like, hey, I got more, bigger, scarier guns than you do. And at that point, well, what refutation is there? The problem is that you can't really do anything with that. It's completely useless. You can't resolve conflicts that way because really all that's needed for rape, theft, and murder to be justified. Just like, hey, look, I'm bigger and stronger than he is. And at that point, like, of course, you get all sorts of economic distortions, resource misallocation. People can just take whatever they want by virtue of being more vicious, more brutal, and having better access to uh, better access to weapons than the other person. And at that point, like the ethic, make no mistake, the ethical is the practical. People assume that
Now,
there is some. I'm just going to say that just assume that there is some division between pragmatic, or what is pragmatic and what is ethical, but truth is, it really isn't.
a lot of people are suggesting in chat, at least one person is saying, they thought ethics are normative. And to be fair, this is something which a lot of libertarians don't really expand upon. And if you want to see somebody actually expand upon this in greater detail, I plan on making a video going over the difference between um, Kantian and Aristotelian takes on rationalism and natural law ethics. But Roderick Long, Sheldon Richman, and Gary Chartier have some good works on this subject. But yeah, so a lot of libertarians, their conception of ethical argumentation, at least as they espouse it, is a Kantian one. In other words, they argue for it as if ethics are a sort of normative preference. Um, for instance, if you've ever watched a Larkin Rose video, or if you've ever heard um, Tom Woods or any of the sort of bigger libertarians talk about ethics and the NAP, one of the, like, a very common rhetorical tort that they use to propagate it is a line something along the lines of, well, you're taught these things from an early age, so everyone understands them. Uh, the sort of implication there being that that these are standards which everyone has, but obviously not everyone understands them. And even if they did understand them, not everyone is going to choose to apply them to their own lives. And there are also various logical problems with this, such as my favorite example that I go to. There is clearly a coercive relationship in any economic exchange within the political economy, because the state is using coercion to manufacture the material conditions which incentivize people to associate in certain manners which they otherwise wouldn't find profitable to do so. If you point a gun at someone's head directly and you tell them to buy something from a convenience store, you're committing an act of aggression, even though, you and the business owner are not directly, coercing one another. The coercion is not between you or the business owner. It's the person pointing a gun at the person going to the cash register's head, or purchasing something's head and giving the person running the store money and forcing them to engage in this association. Well, according to the Kantian position, the Kantian take, there would not be an act of aggression occurring um, by an employer and an employee associating with one another, or somebody buying something from a white market firm that they wouldn't otherwise be incentivized to do. And this is something like this actually is a big part of the reason why vulgar libertarianism, which for those of you who don't know, that's when libertarians defend corporatism and big business. It's not really a problem now because a lot of people see, like, people recognize the issues with it, but for the longest time that actually used to be a very pervasive problem within libertarian circles, because this sort of Kantian position was the default, even though a lot of libertarians didn't understand ethical argumentation. But um yeah, now a lot of libertarians, they understand the Kantian position is flawed, even though they will argue from the Kantian position. Because obviously, if you point this out, well, they'll say that's not a free market exchange, that's corporatism, even though they don't understand that that contradicts Kantian ethical argumentation, the Kantian ethical framework. So, what the Aristotelian framework introduces is the concept of virtue justice versus ethical justice, which I think a lot of people should look into, as it does define ethical argumentation as a descriptive position, as it rightfully is. And because of that, it also answers a lot of questions which otherwise would have gone unanswered. And I would say makes libertarianism, it gives libertarianism to the layman a greater amount of explanatory power and makes it seem both more consistent and pragmatic.
And of course, once every individual is able to understand ethics themselves, it basically makes tyranny impossible. As I was talking about in my Why Ethics Matter video. Fundamentally, nihilism offers no ability to resolve conflicts along any consistent basis. So any question of right and wrong or justice being applied, any conflict resolution can only be done so arbitrarily. Any justice that does happen to result from any nihilist attempt at conflict resolution is largely incidental rather than a mark in favor of nihilism. It has no consistent basis by which it can claim any sort of accuracy, any sort of right and wrong.
Yeah, did I say virtue ethics? I meant virtue justice.
You
I
said you
apologize.
you said virtue justice.
Okay.
I think people are just conflating virtue justice with virtue
Okay,
ethics.
well, from the Aristotelian perspective, all virtue justice is essentially what Kierkegaard would come to describe as lived reality. So something which you practice in your sort of internalized conception of morality or the world and how that intersects with actual observation.
I think the best way to explain it is that virtue justice is identical to how I would describe morality. Morality is just ethics applied in your own daily life. And that's basically how I imagine that Aristotle described virtue justice. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and Ujiri, is that
I was
what
about
you?
to say.
Yeah, is that your name? If you feel like I mischaracterized your view, I'm sorry. This is something that I was actually going to establish anyway. So, think of me playing off your comment as sort of a segue.
All right. So, anyways, let's get to the video. Give me a second here to set up the
Yeah,
screen
Jesus
share.
Christ, we're fucking 15 minutes in. Haven't even gotten into the video yet.
Just turn that speech into a
I
video
think I
itself.
just shared the wrong thing.
Yeah, Sprite from Firefox. Disgusting. Use Firefox.
Well, I mean, I don't actually use Firefox. I just use it for StreamYard. That's literally all I use it for. All right, so now let's go into here. And I remember to delete the URLs this time.
Yay.
So, yeah. And yeah, we were only 41 minutes in because we were doing an audio test before the stream. So, anyways, everybody ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, starting.
No more
Literally the first fucking interjection. I what did I say? I called it. He was gonna. These people are so fucking predictable. This is why I question how they've been able to continue arguing the same bullshit. Oh,
Well,
um,
they've kind of begun on the premise that
okay. Every people in chat are saying there's no audio.
freaking hell.
Oh man.
Okay, so I guess I'm not going to mute myself this time.
All right, so yeah, play through your mic and I'll mute it on my end so I'm not hearing an echo. And all right, let's see if this works.
Ethics describes actions one cannot justly do, but it doesn't direct some invisible force field that physically prevents people from engaging in criminal activity.
Since this video aims to debunk moral nihilism, right off the bat, I will let you know that a moral nihilist will object to the language of just or unjust, because those are words in and of themselves that describe morality, what one ought to do. A moral nihilist says that there are no moral facts, that moral...
Yeah, I fucking called it. That's exactly what he was gonna. That's exactly what he was gonna do, because that's literally the only fucking thing that nihilists have.
Dude.
I refuted his argument before the video began.
And you can see right away that he tries to make an argument that morality is normative, even though when we talk about morality, we're not talking about any sort of normative rules. We're talking about how people apply ethics into their own rights. I mean, it sounds like, and I got this impression I was watching this before the stream, that he's using ethics and morals interchangeably, which is quite honestly a very normie understanding of ethics. He probably learned this in government schools. I don't know. I haven't asked him, but
No, I've explicitly had this argument with him over Discord before. I've explained the difference between sort of lived reality and or morals and ethics. So he's heard the difference before. He just chooses to ignore that.
and I mean, this is another problem that I have with the nihilist argument in general, is that they don't really have a null hypothesis. There's no point at which there's no point at which they would say, like, if you prove this correct or you prove this incorrect, I will no longer be a moral nihilist, or I will no longer be an ethical nihilist. And I think I've made even videos telling people how to get me to stop being an anarchist multiple times. I think I've been pretty clear on that. But I haven't heard a null hypothesis from nihilists, and I haven't heard one from statists either, but that's an aside point. Should we continue, or Azure, do you have anything to add?
No, if I think of something, I'm just letting you talk, because you guys are pretty much saying pretty much anything I would have to say, so let's continue.
Okay.
Morality is not subject to truth statements. It's not truth act. Hence, to a moral nihilist, there are no
Hold on a
just
second. I'm going to back up a bit.
Yeah.
or unjust, because those are words in and of themselves that describe morality, what one ought to do. A moral nihilist says that there are no moral facts, that morality is not subject to truth statements. It's not truth act. Hence, to a moral nihilist, there are no just or unjust actions. There are...
When I say just or unjust, I use those terms to describe actions that one can take that can either be defended using consistent logic or cannot be defended using consistent logic, representing just and unjust specifically. I'm pretty sure
which is what those terms mean in reference to ethical philosophy.
I'm pretty sure I mentioned that in my video, which I understand why he wouldn't why he would cut that out, because obviously timing or time, even though it's a 54-minute video, 55 minutes if you round up. But yeah, saying representing that just and unjust doesn't exist implies that every action that anyone can take ever is completely justified, which in a way is kind of a contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the other problem with relativist philosophy, as I was talking with you about before the stream began, is if by creating a gray area where gray areas don't exist, you create a logical paradox because you're claiming that something is both true and untrue. You're claiming that something is true where your statement is suggesting that there's no such thing as an objective truth.
It's objectively true that there is no such thing as objective truth. That is what we mean. Statements like that are what we mean when we say performative contradiction.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was about to say.
That's
But,
something
yeah.
that I fucking learned in like basic philosophy when I first started taking college.
Someone, Ugiri in chat asks, statists and nihilists, is there a difference? And no, I think that the world that we have is actually a pretty good approximation of a society which has completely strayed away from any semblance of sort of natural law ethics. And how would we actually have a natural law society then? Which I'm sure a lot of people would be asking. Well, you got to have as many inputs as possible, as much competition as possible, both to incentivize people to be as objective as possible in their arbitration, because there's a much greater incentive tied to not being objective. And you would have to be objective. It wouldn't just benefit one side or a special interest, because in a society where association is completely, you're free to associate or disassociate, you couldn't just, you couldn't do that, because people could just not associate with you, and then you wouldn't be able to continue, do it. You couldn't continue being an arbiter. So, in a free society, how you would have the best standard of arbitration is to have as many people being arbiters as is possible. And
I'm sorry.
what?
I'm
were you
sorry.
gonna say?
Go ahead and finish. I'll tell you after.
Well, that is in a sense the natural law argument. It's not that people will just objectively abide by some standard that has to be enforced simultaneously. No, that again is just assuming a false premise to be true.
I mean, I outright say that these are not normative statements. I don't know if he watched a video before making these, before he started doing this commentary on it. It's not a criticism; it's just an observation.
Well, I've argued with him multiple times before about ethics on Discord. Just for some context, this guy's in our Discord server, and so I don't know what he's doing, if he's just being dishonest or something which he wasn't able to respond to. He thinks we didn't meet his standard of proof. But as you pointed out, there doesn't really appear to be a standard of proof that they set or that we could meet, because in their framework, facts are subjective. So just gonna move that goalpost a couple feet further.
And of course,
you get.
Of course, once you get to the problem of not having a null hypothesis, and this is of course the same problem that statists have, it stops being a question of reason or philosophy and starts becoming a question of theology.
Yeah,
it's very much an unscientific idea.
Once you don't have a null hypothesis, you no longer have a truth claim. you can't actually explain anything with your argument, and therefore your position is completely worthless because it doesn't serve as any sort of objective observation. It can't negate claims to the contrary. I could just as easily argue any other conclusion with the exact same argument that you're proposing if you don't have a null hypothesis. And that's a big problem that any relativist arguments have by default.
All right, I'm going to continue now.
I just want to say we got $2 from JF Kennedy, and he asked, "Why does everyone think I'm dead?"
My screen, it says it's $2.01. That penny is very important. Yeah, but anyways, thank you, Mr. President. And the reason everybody thinks you're dead is because the CIA glow in the darks had an actor shoot you in the head, and they had that was televised and everything on live TV. There were literally hundreds of witnesses, and nobody knows that you actually survived that.
Well,
so,
also, even if you didn't die there, you'd be 107 years old. So, yeah.
that would also be a pretty good conclusion to draw that you did not survive.
And he
I mean, it's
just said-
possible, but highly unlikely.
Yeah, in 2020, you'd be 107, so there's a good chance you're not alive anyway.
Isn't Hitler also supposed to be alive, even though he's like 120 something?
Yeah.
He's in his 130s now.
Oh man, that must be like some Nazi super science for like extending life.
Born 1889, so yeah, if Hitler was alive, he would be 130.
Damn.
Because he was born on April 20th, so yeah, 130 and a half.
Wait, JFK just said that Hitler's his roommate. What the hell is he doing? What the hell is Hitler doing in Cuba?
They must be in close contact with some secret society that has immortality.
I'll
this
ping
might
the
be-
Jewish hive. I'll try to ping the Jewish hive mind about it a little later, but they don't really respond to me. They don't like me.
You know, Donald Trump did once say that the reason why that Cuba didn't receive its aid when that hurricane came by was because of incompetency within Cuban government. I have a very strange feeling that the 130-year-old Hitler might have had to do something with it. I'm not
Hitler
confident.
Hitler suddenly appears in modern day Germany. Yeah, and what he says is, "Wow, looks like I didn't have to go to war to achieve the Third Reich. Just call it the European Union, and everyone will voluntarily join."
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, Hitler's only mistake was going to war to achieve his ends. Anyways, let's continue.
Are only actions which are descriptive and no actions which are prescriptive. Meaning that you can find a factual description for why a certain thing acts a certain way, but you can't find a factual prescription of how a certain thing should act.
This perceived failure is the reason critics assume ethics don't matter, or even that they don't exist. At best, they'll argue that they're just some rules people follow because they all agreed to it, as though ethics were just another form of social contract.
Okay, that is an interesting point. Is it another form of social contract? Social contract, noun, and implicit
Oh, God.
agreement among members of a...
Don't tell me he's about to defend the social contract argument.
I think he's going to. I think what he's actually going to do is. I'm just making a prediction here. I did see this part, but I actually don't quite remember what he said off the top of my head. He's going to try to make a comparison between the social contract and his idea of normative ethics that he thinks I believe in.
Oof.
Society to cooperate for social benefits, for example, by sacrificing some individual freedom for state protection. Theories of social contract became popular in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century among theorists such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau as a means of explaining the origin of government and the obligations of subjects. Well, ethics serve a certain purpose. If they didn't, there would be no reason to remind people to be ethical. So, what is it?
We don't have to remind people to be ethical. That's not how that works.
If I, as an individual, want to do something, but I feel compelled not to do it because I deem it would be unethical, well, it's a sacrifice of my individual freedom in favor of being.
You don't have the freedom to murder somebody. That is not how that works. If you murder somebody and you are protected from compensating somebody who's representing the person that you murdered, that's actually a form of legal privilege, not actually a freedom, because it's not something that you can naturally demonstrate the ability to do.
I mean, I'd very much like to hear Finchernaut try to make an objective defense of murder, since the only way that his statement could be accurate, that somehow ethical principles are an infringement on people's freedoms, then that means we must have the freedom to murder. And I'd like to hear an explanation of how we have the freedom to murder.
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure it'll be. Sorry.
A lot of people don't really understand that they just think anything you can do is a freedom. Autonomy and freedom are the same thing, in other words. Well, I'd say that's another thing I think libertarians could do a better job at explaining a bit more often.
I mean, Yujiri is in chat. He's saying, I really wish you guys would stop conflating ability with right. You absolutely can demonstrate the ability to murder.
And yeah, fair enough. Well, what I mean by that is it's not possible to logically justify murder. Yeah, you can murder somebody, but there's no way to explain why you have the right to murder somebody.
Well, you can. You just got to appeal to circular reasoning in order to be able to do it, which is what
exactly. You can't. It's not something that is consistent that you can create any sort of argument for.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't justify it, well, then we have to assume it's not a legitimate thing.
And here's our null hypothesis. Venture make a consistent, logical, non-contradictory argument that we have the right to murder.
And that's just to you, Jiri. Yeah, that's kind of the point that I was getting at, is that libertarians most libertarians don't really go into detail explaining the difference between an ability and a right. I have the ability to steal, but I don't have the justification to do so. And they should do a better job explaining why that's actually an important distinction to make, as well as why justifications are important.
It's kind of a moot point anyway, because, I mean, like, what does this have to do with, like, ethics in general? It's like, we're talking about whether or not something is justified. We're not talking about whether or not we can do it. What's the point?
Well, you're talking to people who are questioning whether or not whether or not justification is even relevant. So I suppose that a better way to put it is libertarians should do a better job explaining why that's relevant, because there actually is a pretty strong argument for it, and it kind of frustrates me to see that that's not delved into as much as it really ought to be.
I forgot what I was going to say. Crap.
Oof.
Go ahead and enter deep thinking mode.
Okay, so let me see here. Yeah, I've completely lost it. Anyways, let's just continue.
But where do ethics come from? They come from
I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have stopped there.
other people of being ethical. But where do ethics come from? They come from other people's values. And what is the state? Well, it's a collection of people within a geographical area who create laws which they expect other people to follow like they do.
What?
That's why I wanted to pause that 2 seconds later, because I had a feeling he was gonna do one of two things. He was either going to explain himself, or he was gonna go into a whole bunch of other things that we wouldn't even know where to begin to talk about. So let me just back up again.
Favor of being ethical. But where do ethics come from?
Ethics come from our understanding and observations of logic and applying that into interpersonal relationships. We know they exist because logic is consistent and we live in a logical, consistent, axiomatic universe. We may not understand all the principles behind it, but that doesn't mean that the information is completely unknowable to us.
Well, we know that logic has to be consistent because if that wasn't the case, then there would be, a clear violation of the law of non-contradiction. There would be sort of self-evident problems created by that.
Not to mention that the logical system that ethics are derived from is the same logical system that the scientific method comes from. And we know that the scientific method works because the only way you're able to watch this video or listen to this stream right now is because a whole bunch of people figured out how logic works in regards to electricity, in regards to materials, in manufacturing, and applying all those principles to create all sorts of wonderful technological advancements that we have today. So in order for ethics to not be able to work, you should not be able to be watching this stream right now.
And I'm kind of surprised you haven't commented on the state creates laws that they expect us to follow like the people in the state do.
That's why I did want to, but here's the thing, like he said so much in that like 16 seconds that I had to back up just so we can go over it and we don't forget everything. So yes, we're getting to that. Don't worry.
Because
they come from.
Well, I mean, you'd already gotten past that part. That's where you'd paused it right after you said that. But yeah, I mean, for regular viewers of this channel, this should just be a given. But the entire point of a state is so that people can create systemic coercion and use this to parasitically live off of a population, which they essentially force into slavery. So obviously they don't apply the same standards to themselves that they do to us. There's a very clear, distinct class dichotomy between state actors and non-state actors. That's why all the services which the state engages in, they operate so radically different compared to even the basic model of those same exact services, but provided for by private individuals. That's why there is very clearly, a sort of incentive difference between people who operate within the state and people who are subjugated by the state. Legislation is not something which they abide by. It's a threat to us to follow their commands, or else they're going to use violence against us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we can even demonstrate that they don't even follow their own laws. I mean, just look anywhere on our channel or what's going on right now and you'll find fucking shitloads of corruption.
Hold on a second. Let's just keep going.
Other people's values. And what is the state? Well, it's a collection of people within a geographical area who create laws which they expect other people to follow like they do.
That's why I wanted to continue. like they do.
They do.
I mean, the whole you said it earlier. The whole point of a state is to create a set of arbitrary rules that they themselves don't have to follow. You only need to like look up one of our several cops videos to see examples, not only on video but even conceptually, of the government not following its own legislation. Government agents being exempted from their laws because of, I'm sorry, being exempted from their own legislation because of either some exception that they carved out for themselves or simply because of crap like, oh, what's that term where government agents can get out of it for, I forget what the term is. I can't remember what it is.
I'm blanking on it as well. You'd have to be a bit more specific, but there are a couple of different ways that the government can do something which is blatantly illegal for a non-state actor to do, but something that if they do, it's perfectly fine. Imminent domain would be a great example. The government can steal property, and if they declare that it's imminent domain. Qualified immunity, that's it.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Qualified immunity.
Okay. Well,
and just look at the Free Thought Project if you want perfect examples of government agents committing obviously illegal acts, such as rape, kidnapping, murder, framing people, planting evidence, assault, battery, and them just at worst, they get a slap on the wrist. And there's a news story like at least once a day about this. So it's this kind of thing is not uncommon, and those are just the things we hear about. I'm sure it's a lot more common than people think. Oh, and there's also what's it called? The one where they can take people's property as part of a traffic stop.
What is it?
Civil asset forfeiture.
Yes, that's another thing.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But suffice to say, the whole point of a state is to create a two-tier society.
I also want to point out that we don't trust government schools. However, one of the things I do remember learning, that was hammered into my head while I was growing up, is that well before the United States, one of the things that made the United States great is that other governments before it was the fact that there was that two-class system. We went over history of things like the Magna Carta, because the fucking governments back then were blatantly just hemorrhaging the wealth and the power of the regular population, where the people are like, hey, you know what? The government shouldn't have this type of power, and they should abide by these set of rules. So even from that standpoint, I understand how Finn can say, yeah, we're supposed to follow the laws like they do. No, for most of our history, they have not followed their own rules. No, it's bullshit.
Liberals are just liberalism was just efficiency experts for the government coming along and fixing the sort of economic problems created by mercantilism.
And then they kind of just went right back into feudalism.
Yeah, what we have now isn't.
I meant mercantilism.
Yeah, it's not mercantilism, but it's neo-mercantilism. It's mercantilism, but it's not direct management by the state, so it doesn't have the sort of problems created by that with protectionism, creating all the scarcity. I mean, it still creates scarcity. It's just somewhat manageable. I mean, it's still eventually unsustainable, because any model which operates around infinite growth and collecting debt infinitely is going to inevitably collapse in on itself. But it's not completely stupid like OG mercantilism, where you couldn't export goods.
It was literally illegal to compete with the East India Company.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's continue.
How then are ethics any different from a social contract? An ethicist has grand theories which they claim everybody is obligated to follow in order to serve the needs of society. A social contract theorist, just like the ethicist, has grand theories which they claim everybody is obligated to follow in order to serve the needs of society.
If as Esso was describing earlier, if you're a Kantian, yeah. I don't know if you noticed, but we're not Kantians.
I don't think even a lot of libertarians are Kantians. I think, like I've said, they argue like they don't understand ethical philosophy, so they don't actually know what Kantian rationalism or Aristotelian rationalism are. And that's not a dig at them. I mean, it is kind of an obscure subject matter, especially when you are introduced to libertarianism as a sort of political affiliation, as most people are. But, I mean, and this isn't a knock at anybody. I mean, if you actually were to develop a sort of robust understanding of competing rationalist arguments, it just makes it easier, and it makes a much stronger argument for your libertarianism. So that's all that I'm saying here. It's not a dig at anybody. It's just I'm trying to help you out.
Mm-hmm. Now, anyways, continuing.
Both ethics and social contract are sacrifices of individual freedom in favor of some kind of protection.
I'm sorry, but what
What?
freedom is being sacrificed in favor of protection under an objective ethical framework?
The freedom to murder someone.
Ah, crap, you're right. Should
Not
have thought of that.
not freedom though, as we've gone over.
But Esso, I have a bigger gun than you do, so I have the right to murder. That's how that works.
Whether this protection is state protection or societal protection is really just a semantic difference.
The difference being that a social contract is a consensus agreement imagined by statists that explains how society works, without devolving into a dog-eat-dog madhouse of utter chaos. Ethics, however, are truth claims about social interaction useful in conflict resolution.
Social contract is a consensus agreement imagined by statists that explains how society works without devolving into a dog-eat-dog madhouse of utter chaos. Ethics are truth claims about social interaction useful in conflict resolution.
I just said that.
Dilvani, I think that's how you pronounce her name, showed up. I have the biggest gun here. Any of you dudes want to compare? She says. It doesn't matter whether or not you have a bigger gun. I don't know if you do or not. I have 4 of them, and I made 3 of them myself, and I bought the other one from a friend. In either case, none of them are legal, so it doesn't matter if yours are bigger than mine. I'm still a better libertarian.
Because that's totally how that works. Does that mean that the guy who just has this giant ass gun collection is the best libertarian?
Well, if none of them were bought off the white market, it does.
Oh, fair enough.
I will accept these definitions, even though the Google definition of social contract wouldn't be mutually exclusive with this definition of ethics. But it's not the words themselves that are important, but rather...
How is the social contract, even by the definition that he Googled, helpful in any way with conflict resolution?
Did you just admit to breaking the law? Isn't that dangerous? I mean, if you talk about going to the store, you just admitted to breaking the law. So, no, I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, in case you're not clear, under antitrust legislation, all commerce is illegal. It's not possible to not be legal. It's not impossible.
The message, so I won't be a dick.
For any number of reasons you can think of, people will have conflicting and mutually exclusive claims to things like property and personal liberty. resolved by a third party if they can't resolve it among themselves. So, what do? How do we achieve this? Well, the first option is to have a complete harmony of interests. This is what collectivist philosophies like Marxism or nationalism seek to do: absorb everyone into a singular collective identity, such that members of the collective would have fewer conflicts. The goal being everyone in society having one common and identical set of interests. After all, if everyone had the same interest, surely there would be no conflict. If the population of the whole world were subsumed, then the theory goes that conflict could be reduced to zero.
I mean, it's true, I'm not a collectivist, but if by some miracle everyone had the same interests, which would be impossible in this world, then there would be no conflicts.
Which is
you-
exactly why ethics are not normative. Yeah,
I only-
obviously ethical philosophy isn't normative, because if it was, there wouldn't be any fucking point in making a legal theory.
And I only brought up the idea of a complete harmony of interests because I knew someone was going to bring that up eventually, and I wanted to get ahead of it by explaining, like, yeah, the whole point is not to prevent conflict; it's to resolve conflict. If it were normative, then yes, the objective of ethics is to prevent conflicts, but that's not what it's trying to do. And I heard you giggling, Asia.
I was just reading the chat. That's all.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like you pissed them off. There's like 3 of them spamming.
I gotta see this.
I mean, Ujiri, we have people on Twitter who can get 200k likes for saying legalize or normalize shoplifting. So I mean, saying that you own several illegal guns on a channel, that's a pretty somewhat small.
Lysander Spooner says that you don't understand what normative means.
And yes, I do. It is establishing a standard for a behavioral norm. So yes, in the context of this discussion, the way that Finn is trying to frame ethics, it would be considered a normative stance.
Also, by the way, Devani, please provide information on what gun you have because I actually would want to know if it actually is bigger.
There would only be one consciousness that thinks alike and works towards the same goal. Where can you find room for conflict in such a scenario? Granted, this is not realistic, but I can entertain a hypothetical. In such a scenario, if I have the demand for, let's say, potatoes, then everyone else would also have the demand for me to have potatoes. Or if you had the demand for potatoes, then I would have a demand for you to have potatoes.
Well, the whole point of the hive mind example that I brought up is that there is no you or I. There is only one being, which would, yes, be an I, but there would be no you. In a sense, there's a reason that you hold an apple when you eat an apple in your hand as opposed to your foot. Because it's more efficient for you to be there. And you'll just be, in you would just be an organ of it.
But if you mean that both you and me have a demand for potatoes, then now our interests are actually not aligned, but at odds, because there is a scarcity of potatoes and we both want them. So, as Ragnar Redbeard would put it, natural law makes no false judgments. The victor gets the potatoes every time. Wait, did you change the quote?
Imagine thinking
However,
fucking Ragnar Redbeard is anything more than a bunch of edgy hot topic bullshit. That's like some Albert Camus tier philosophy right there.
I don't know if you would ever characterize, or I don't know if you would ever take a person named Ragnar Redbeard and quote him unironically as a source on philosophy. Just by the name alone, you can tell that this guy's not going to be the friendliest person.
Yeah, that's the pseudonym of the unknown author of the book called Might is Right. and that's basically just what it is. It's a couple 100-page long book going into nonsensical, self-contradictory rambling about ethical nihilism that a lot of people like this apparently think is deep philosophy.
It's kind of the stuff that belongs on the subreddit I'm 14 and this is deep.
Exactly. Exactly. I read that one Nietzsche quote about hunting down God inside of a cave, and I am edgy atheist 14-year-old, and I think this is fucking deep.
The worst part is that we know people like that actually exist. I seriously suspect that there are 13 and 14-year-olds who browse that subreddit unironically. Not even realize that it's just there to mock those exact kinds of people.
I'm now tempted to go look at it.
Yeah, there's a section of that book, Might is Right, where like it contradicts itself all over the place, but my favorite by far is the author starts talking about eugenics immediately after talking about trying to explain methodological individualism.
One of those two is not like the other. One of those two doesn't belong. Anyways.
Remember, kids, eugenics is progressive.
Everyone, literally everyone, prefers to think and act exactly alike. Well, I don't, so bam, debunked.
Neither do I. I'm a nihilist, not a communist, not a nationalist, not a collectivist. I hope this is getting to some kind of point about objective ethics.
But let's go a bit deeper. People's individual preferences will conflict with
You're a
those dictated by
nihilist,
collective.
so you're a nihilist, so you don't have the ability to claim that you're not. Because that's the problem with nihilism. It doesn't negate anything, therefore it doesn't have any argument against any of those things. But since, those things, many of them are mutually exclusive, that obviously can't be the case. So, nihilism can't be the case.
Although in fairness to Finn, it is the threshold for debunking the claim that everyone would want to be part of a hive mind is very easy. All you have to do is just have one person say, yeah, no, I don't. Which, fortunately, I did for him, but he affirmed that, so yay.
At some point. How does collectivism resolve these? What rights do individuals have to protect themselves against a predatory collective? Or are collectives incapable of committing crimes? How can one know who's in the right under a collectivist framework? With that said, forget about collective versus individual conflict. Individual versus individual conflict within the collective can only be resolved by appealing to the collective, in whose interests is more closely aligned with the collective. However, collectivism gives no explanation about why the collective ought to be obeyed and why everyone's interests should be aligned with the collective's, aside from appealing to the collective itself.
I can give a very good reason, because the collective will beat your skull in if you don't obey them.
That's exactly our problem. I mean, again, like our main criticism of might makes right, but it's exactly like that meme. You know that Hoppian meme that goes, "Oh, you guys just want feudalism." Yes, that's pretty much our criticism of nihilism. It's like, "Oh, you guys just want might makes right." Yes.
Yeah, thankfully, free societies are more decentralized and operate around peer-to-peer associations. So, no, that's not really a problem. If a gang tries to beat your head in, there's a good chance that because your neighbors don't want to get their heads beaten in, or because you can easily find help, they'll be surrounded by an even bigger gang of self-interested individuals pretty quickly.
Not to mention that their financial interests are largely going to be completely destroyed. Not only in the sense that dead people don't have financial interests, but that sure they may gain some short-term gain, but no one's going to want to do anything with them. No one's going to want to patronize their establishments or otherwise even give them services. So their ability to participate in any marketplace is going to be significantly reduced. Their only option is to flee to another place that hasn't heard of them, which, given the existence of the internet in some form, will continue well beyond the collapse of the states, will be very difficult, and will still require a significant expenditure on the part of the aggressor. So there is very much a disincentive for people to be violent, aggressive gangs.
Hypothetically, that is. In reality, you can disobey the collective as much as you wish, as long as you don't let the collective know that you're disobeying them. If you let them know, they might beat your skull in, but if you don't, they have no reason to.
Well, that's the point of the conflict I mentioned. One of them, especially if someone like was legitimately aggressed against, or someone otherwise has proof that the person that they're trying to victimize acted against the will of the collective, their really only option is to flee. The option of the person who is acting against the will of the collective doesn't really have the option to be able to, not let the collective know about it. It's not like people are voluntarily reporting all of their actions to whatever leadership or infrastructure exists that maintains the collective. No, it's going to be your neighbors or people around who have otherwise aligned their interests with the collective more than you have, who are going to rat you out.
Yeah, somebody in the chat is telling people to vote for Bierman, Libertarian Party. Yeah, I think they came here from that I am 14 subreddit, in which case I don't know what part of the country you live in, but there's a good chance it's past your bedtime. I mean, you're 14, got to get up for school in the morning, and I don't know.
All right.
This is very much a because I said so kind of argument.
It's not a because I said so argument, it's more of a threat, really. A robber that points a gun at you at the dark alley is not telling you to give them your money because they said so. They are telling you to give them your money or else they'll blow your brains out.
So it's because I said so, but with an extra step.
Pretty much.
It's essentially like we already know the leftists do the really wordy memes. Essentially, that's like if they were to make a threat, just like, yeah, it's my way or the highway, but then they have to say it in a very innocuous, very wordy way. It's fucking.
I mean, the very presence of a gun implies the absence of a voluntary interaction.
And what do you think is going to happen, like, if you don't obey? Like, yeah, if you're going to fucking die, the dude is clearly saying, yeah, it's my way or the highway.
Not to
Like,
mention,
how can you, like...
not to mention that Fintronaut here, probably by complete accident, has basically made my points that I'm going to be making later in this video about why nihilism has no ability to refute statism, because he just demonstrated exactly why nihilists don't have any consistent argument against the state, because they don't see anything wrong with the arrangement of the robber of a robber and their victim, of the robber exchanging the non infliction of harm or non infliction of death with the exchanging of resources.
Well, that's I mean, I've explained that point, a couple of times in varying degrees of detail. But yes, statism, not nihilism. Well, I mean, they're basically the same thing, but nihilism doesn't have the ability to refute that, so it can't, have any sort of objection to it.
Any sort of objection to statism is largely a trivial question. It becomes important. It becomes a matter of preference on par of what's your favorite color of lollipop. you really don't have any argument against the state. It's just, I don't think the state works in my personal interests, therefore I don't want a state. Well, I think the state works in my interests, so yes, we do have a state, and I'm going to force you to participate in that state.
Insurgent says the party is our enemy. Well, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Parties are state-run organizations, and the state is our enemy, therefore parties are our enemy.
Very much so.
Uh-huh.
So, a different method of conflict resolution is needed. Collectivism is ill equipped to handle this and leads us back right to where we started. The fact that a collectivist philosophy even exists is proof that a harmony of interests is a desired end goal and not the status quo. So, a different method of conflict resolution is needed. Another alternative is having it be a physical contest. Might makes right, as it were. It sounds badass, don't get me wrong, but as a method of conflict resolution, it fails to identify any truths or observations independent of one's own physical prowess.
It does not fail at identifying them. To say it fails at it implies that it attempts to identify any other truths or observations other than physical prowess. But that's
At this point, I mean, is he even going to say anything we haven't already refuted?
I actually don't know. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to just like let it play, and then as soon as someone wants to say something, just tell me to hit pause.
Should we try that? Hey,
Yeah.
chat, you want to go ahead and do that? Because, yeah, I think we're running out of new points.
We're basically 8 minutes into the video, 8 minutes out of 54. And yeah, there's really not much more to say.
This was 8 minutes.
This was 8 minutes. We
And how
are
long has the stream?
1 hour and 6 minutes, and we spent the first 15 minutes talking about other stuff.
It took us less time to like. We didn't have to watch the whole thing, and we.
I refute.
refuted
Yeah,
it.
I refuted the entire video before it even started. Ethics are normative. Let me try and do a Finnish accent. Ethics are normative. No, they're not.
That didn't sound as good as it could
No,
have.
I didn't even try. I
Ethics are
mean,
normative.
yeah, ethics are normative. I'd probably do a better job if I was thinking of Romanian because V, and I think V is funny.
It might help.
Oh,
But
I'm looking.
yeah.
Oh, never mind. I legit thought Ujiri was saying that if you refuse to vote, then you consented to. Where is it?
You consent to be ruled by refusing to avoid it.
Yeah, if there wasn't any other context, I would have been like, "What the fuck is this dude arguing?" Like that's like level 1 status argument right there. But
Well,
thank goodness I read the rest.
Yeah, he just says like he lists his top 3 favorite.
But Finn, he tried arguing consequentialism, like might makes right. Like he tries to doing that.
Devani, your gun can't possibly be 8 inches.
The thing like that I don't understand what the might makes right is that like, well, if it's at the expense of someone else, then how can you call it a right?
Because
I mean, a right is something
reasons.
that everyone has and it's objective, and if that's
Well,
not the case,
Like that's as I pointed out, nihilists don't understand freedom or rights, so they think that privileges are the same thing as rights because they don't understand the difference between an ability and a right. Right being something which is logically consistent and something which you naturally have the ability to demonstrate your a legitimate capability to do so, and a privilege being something that you could only engage in and not be not be held accountable because there's a coercive monopoly. Good God, someone's echoing really badly.
It's probably me.
I was done talking, but yeah, that's distracting me. So I'm sure that I sound great, being distracted by the echo. Not like it matters because I don't uh, to myself I don't sound that great even normally.
All right. So, anyways, I'm going to continue the thing. Let me just mute myself.
It's not what it tries to do. It's a descriptive statement about the physical nature of this world. There are objects in this world. There are no ethical objects in this world that I'm aware of, anyway. Very, very few people would disagree that physical objects exist. But where are these ethical objects? You splice open a human body, you will find a heart, a spleen, lungs, blood, but you will not find ethics. Where are these ethics? Where do they hide? So you see, in the physical world, might makes right is an accurate description of the nature of reality.
Yeah, I was just going to pause it here because this is very much a radical empiricist argument that things that you can't see, touch, feel, or otherwise physical objects are the only things that exist, and nothing that is a priori or any concepts could ever be described as existing.
Yeah, you need an a priori concept to exist in order to contextualize information. Information itself is meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, the number 2, the color red, happiness, all of those things do not exist. You can't touch red. You can't feel 2, and God forbid I learn what happiness tastes like. There is no sensory input, although you could argue that there is sensory input for color that accurately describes it. But I mean, just try to, right now, describe red.
Yeah, or how do you know what a heart is?
Logic smells like feet.
Well,
Yeah, like if you're going to make that argument, you would have to say the same thing for logic. It's not something that's physical, and by that case, you would have to outright deny it altogether. Which, if you're going to do that, well, why on earth would you make this video? Because
Pretty
it would be
much.
a self-defeating argument. You're using logic to debunk logic. Yeah, that's like a 50 IQ, like gained moment right there. if
That's
you're
a
gonna do that.
well,
that's a pro gamer move.
that's the other problem with empiricism is its premise operates around a performative contradiction. The only observations which are true are observations which operate outside of logic. There's no such thing as objective logic. Well, that's a statement which itself assumes that logic is objective. So because in order for that statement to be established, you're setting up an a priori truth.
The only
So
way for this, the only way for his statement that things that are a priori don't exist is to completely reject the scientific method altogether, which is ultimately impossible since he's going to largely rely on the scientific method to be able to make that truth claim, that a priori doesn't exist. Which, yeah, I think we've pretty much beaten it into the ground. This is, I don't know if he just like had a brain fart and completely forgot about numbers, mathematics, the scientific method, and all this other non-physical a priori things that accurately describe reality. But yeah, this is pretty not good.
I mean, the other day in Discord, I do remember seeing him say that mental illness is a spook. So, chances are of him actually being serious when he says this stuff, I'm going to say it's pretty high.
Oh God, are we getting into autism as a choice?
No, we're not there yet.
autism is a choice is the broke tier a version of that argument. Autism is a choice and masochism. That's woke.
That is going to be. I figure that this is where it's going. Even though, yes, brain scans of some of people with certain mental illnesses have revealed that they are structured differently than regular neurotypical humans. So this is obviously not the case. Anyways,
makes no false judgments. The victor gets the gold every time.
The power of the strongman who imposes this set of rules upon society. Would it create social cohesion? Sure. Being the most powerful guy in the room can get a lot of people to agree with you. Trouble is, a 15 million man army can't alter how gravity affects you. A tank column can't make your recollection of your next dentist appointment any more accurate. And factual questions of right and wrong do not change if one has 1 billion nukes, one nuke, or none at all.
Okay, so you're criticizing the idea of might makes right because it cannot alter the physical laws of reality. Are you going to tell me that you have an idea that can alter the physical laws of reality? That your groundbreaking ethical theory will reach out into the fabric of time and space and make a few key adjustments?
No, that's the argument that you were making. I'm trying to describe reality. You're trying to say, no, the framework by which we understand reality doesn't exist. We can just, and the logical conclusion of this is, as I described in that video, that a tank column can somehow make a recollection of your dentist appointment more accurate, or that a billion nukes can change questions of right and wrong. I can just get my house to become 3 stories tall by having a bunch of men pointing guns at it for like an hour.
Yeah, the bespoke take. Somebody just wrote in chat, autism is a superpower.
That is beautiful.
I wish someone took just edited the this video, like Finn's video, where he actually talks about ideas actually having a change in reality, and then just that last clip, so it looks like he's just arguing with himself.
Yeah. They're not mental illnesses though. They're superpowers. Paranoid schizophrenic people, they're superheroes able to see into a reality that we can't.
They live in the Matrix.
Or better yet, maybe they actually are hearing voices, just that the voices they hear are people like thousands of miles away.
Everyone who's schizophrenic is actually like is like the main character from They Live. That's actually reality. We just can't see it.
That would be amazing and horrifying, but it would also explain a lot. Anyways.
Of course you're not, because you define ethics as truth claims about social interaction useful in conflict resolution. Well, might makes right is also a truth claim about social interactions, though maybe it's not useful in conflict resolution.
It's not, though.
Not its
it's not a truth claim, though. Well, it is. It's a truth claim which negates the idea that there can be truth claims. And
it's
that's
an anti-truth claim.
That's the problem with it, though, that we've been trying to highlight.
Though it's the problem with another problem with might makes right in terms of it being a truth claim in social interactions. Adding those extra words to the truth claim part is that it implies that there is nothing wrong with rape or murder, simply because that, obviously physical force had to be used and it was superior to their victim, so therefore what they did was justified. Which also, ironically, refutes the point about the moral or ethical nihilist rejects just the idea of just and unjust altogether.
We're just kind of going over the same points over and over again. So, I mean, should we just end the stream?
How about we just end the video and just watch another video?
I don't have another video, though.
How about I grab something like from Jim Sterling? Because, I mean, that's something different.
Yeah, I plan on actually... God damn it, you made me fucking... I have a series planned, which when I go back to regularly writing essays, I'm gonna start making episodes of this series. and the series is called Content Checker, and it's going to be because people have been asking me to go back to making commentary videos. I've decided that I'm going to actually like go over entire channels instead of going over like individual commentaries, because I don't find that to be very interesting. And Jim Sterling is going to be one of the people in the first season of Content Checker. I have 10 episodes planned, and I think it probably it should be a series that I think everybody will enjoy.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I remember you've been talking about it for quite a while now.
Yeah, it's kind of a parody of Content Cop. Yeah, it's a agorist Content Cop.
Excellent. But anyways, yeah, we are going over stuff we've already talked about. So, I mean, I really had no expectations that we were going to finish this video in this stream anyway. But yeah, I don't even think that there's going to be like a part 2.
Yeah,
There's really, we kind of, I don't know what else he's going to do other than try to reassert the same points I've already made.
what if he's just like, no, wait, you have to look further in this video because I said this, and it just turns out the same shit.
I made the
That's-
same argument, but phrased it slightly differently, so you have to go watch the whole video.
I mean, if actually is a good argument that he makes that might be worth addressing, I'll take a look at it separately. And if it is, yeah, we'll do another stream about it, assuming it's like
Worthwhile.
enough to fill up an entire stream. Like even if it's like, oh, I prefer like at least 10 minutes of original arguments. They might be there. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, until then, we're gonna have to wrap this up.
I mean, by the
All right.
just 8 minutes into the video, like I had like so many of my brain cells committed suicide that I don't think I want to watch. Like,
Anyway.
another. Okay.
What I was gonna say is, tomorrow or the day after, I should have a new video up. It's gonna be a news clip. I've been writing and recording off and on over the last week, so you guys can look forward to that.
And I've got an article. I got one half of an article reply that I've been working on. I actually finished the script. I just need to do some proofreading.
Plus, we have a basically finished essay, which we wrote back in like November, but didn't make into a video. So I can just write a bit more onto that, and then we can have that out probably within the next week or so.
How about like one stream we like whenever we have the impeachment trials, we just like watch that and just laugh at it for the stream.
No,
No.
Yeah, no.
I'm not even slightly interested in doing that. The whole impeachment hearing, the whole process itself has been sort of the epitome of a distraction story.
I was about to say it afterward.
It's it's getting to the point where it's such an obvious distraction story that even the fucking Mockingbird media, when they talk about it, they have to say, "Oh, we're tired of hearing about it," while they go on to dedicate like 90% plus of their news cycle to the impeachment hearing.
I remember people talking about the Bill Clinton impeachment. This was before my time, obviously, but I remember people. He's talking about it in retrospect and how debilitating, damaging, and just exhausting it was, that whole process. And I get absolutely none of that sense today. People kind of just, it might just be because that was during a third turning and this is during a fourth turning, where corrupt politicians and the old order is kind of to be expected. Whereas in the third turning, like there's still at least some semblance of respect for the office and respect for the old guard, as it was termed. And nowadays, it's just sort of like,
It's it's the most surreal thing to listen to Fox try and be controlled opposition. Like that's seriously what it is. Like I was making myself some food the other night, and my fucking boomer parents were watching Laura Ingraham, and that's literally what it was. It was Laura Ingraham said, well, we're tired of hearing about impeachment, and like her entire show was just talking about impeachment.
It seems to me that the conservative, what's the term? Controlled opposition narrative is we're tired of the impeachment.
It's getting to the point where they can't help but performatively contradict themselves in their narratives. That's how bad it is.
Sorry, I'm just typing in chat.
You know,
But
I should point out that our stream is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends.
Oh yeah, that really crappy turn-based game with the fairly mediocre graphics and very forgettable story that everybody basically has to read a script from in order to be able to accurately sponsor it. Yeah, they've decided to let us read from the script. We looked at it for like 2 seconds and we decided, yeah, screw this. So we're basically just going to go ahead and say that Raid Shadow Legends is a really crappy greatest game of all time. It has so many character customization options that you never actually get to see. And yeah, it's great.
Before I run over this dog with a steamroller, let me give a shout out to my sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends.
That fucking clip, if I didn't watch all of it, I was totally prepared to kick fucking server, dude. Oh my goodness. That clip. I gotta save that.
It's unfortunate that Raid Shadow Legends, like their advertising Armageddon has actually been successful and they've become like one of the most downloaded apps in the App Store. Pretty sure the Google one.
Before this ISIS beheading video, let's give a shout out to our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends.
Yo, there's like a school shooter, and he's like, remember, subscribe to Vanos Gaming.
People are still trying to speculate with how old I am. You can see it in the chat.
Wow. Before we make all the popular kids pay for ignoring us, let's give a shout out to our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends.
Are you tired of corporations hijacking your private info? Well, cry no more. We have a random ass VPN.
Open VPN. So you can be tricked into thinking that your internet traffic is secure while it's actually not. The VPN just gives your information to various websites who then give it to the government.
Raid Shadow VPN.
Oh no.
Raid Shadow VPN.
I feel like someone should just make a VPN company and just call themselves Raid Shadow VPN.
Raid Shadow VPN.
That'd be a fantastic mean VPN.
Illuminati.org is not a taken domain.
Mike Bloomberg for president.
Who was that one dude that like wore like a boot on his head and tried to run for president when he actually got on TV?
Asia, where have you been?
I mean, I've been busy playing Raid Shadow Legends. I mean,
we streamed with him.
Yeah, we interviewed that guy, and he, well, not to spoil anything, but he's about to do a sponsor for our channel.
Where have you been?
Living under a rock, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah. Anyway, well, we've gone on 10 more minutes than we planned on. So
I kind of planned on going on 2 hours, but yeah, we don't have to.
I went mine 2 hours.
I mean, we don't really have much else to talk about.
Hashtag Aristotle gang.
Hashtag Pinecone gang.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and head out, or if you're not gonna stop streaming.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna end the stream soon. So,
All right.
anyways, thank you guys for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
And I just want to say, like, I do apologize to Fintronaut because I said I wanted to do the whole stream, but unfortunately weren't able to get to it simply because, well, there's really not much to talk about without going over the things that we already talked about. So, yeah, I do hope you understand. Like, I don't mean this with any malice at all. But anyways, yeah, let's get going. Anyways, thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Bye.